course of the panel, if anybody has during the course of the panel discussion. We're going to answer those questions probably at the end, unless for some reason it fits into the discussion the way right where it is. But so please, any questions anybody has at any point, please put them in the chat. I'll moderate that and then check with them at the end so we can make sure that I ask those questions to our panelists. We're gonna let people gather for a few more minutes here. Feel free to awkwardly talk amongst yourself as things happen on Zoom, where you're talking to somebody whose face you see, but not everybody else sees, as we've gotten used to doing in Zoom. And I am just doing a couple of the little technical tweaks here. It's eerily quiet. Don't, you know, feel
I know, I'm not used to nobody talking at all.
Oh, how's the weather, everybody?
It's so cold. How cold is it?
Is it really supposed to snow on Wednesday?
No one today.
I'm hearing.
We had flurries in Orchard Park this morning for a brief time.
We had a little bit too.
I think it's supposed to be 70 tomorrow, but then snowing by Thursday.
Yeah.
Good old Buffalo weather.
It's 70 in Orchard Park.
Oh, here's Katie.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, Katie. So good to see you.
Good to see you too, Buffaloocci.
The other day when I was thinking an appointment.
We're going to just give people a few more minutes to join us. If you're just joining us, welcome to another edition of Buffalo Niagara Sales and Marketing Executives Programming. This is Marketing Fundamentals and Best Practices, a panel discussion with some of the brightest minds in all of marketing in the United States of America and maybe even the world.
Maybe landed on a little thick.
I would include you in that.
What I meant was right on.
That's what I thought you'd say.
Hey, Paul, I like your house. Did you move?
Actually, I have a tea time in about an hour, so let's get going.
Oh man! Wait a minute, Park.
Yeah, it's a backup park.
He does actually live there.
I do. Right there is where my room is. Right there.
Right.
Is it bad that I'd rather get
I think I've been in that room.
vaccine
There's no
than
air
a
conditioning
tea
there.
time?
They just expanded vaccine eligibility to 30 and up.
Did they?
Okay, now I qualify.
Me too.
And it's 16 and up starting next week. So everyone should be able to get that.
Well, I hate to tell you, I qualified in the last round and feels a little like I got punched, but otherwise I'm fine.
I hate to tell you, I qualified for the first round.
What was that, 80 and up?
Whoa!
I qualified too, Paul, so I'll make you feel better.
I'm going tomorrow.
I'm going today.
We need a mute, Liz.
How's the
I see Elizabeth Marino right there on my screen, so I'm going to mention her first. Joe Pollock is here. I know that Ed Helm is here. I know Paul Chisholm is also here. I think I saw Lindsay Zajac as well. Lindsay's here as well. And if I'm missing anybody, of course, and our president of BNSME, Mr. Tony Blasting. And I couldn't mention a association in Western New York that's successful without mentioning the incomparable Gene Hellert, who is also here joining us, who will be helping us man the questions and all that kind of stuff. And also letting people in from the waiting room. So, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator. So you may remember our moderator from her time as an on-air personality, multimedia producer, and assignment editor on the award-winning NBC Channel 2 News right here in Western New York. By the way, Christy, I wrote this myself, so I hope I don't mess up. Since that time, Christy Whitberardi has become a person to know in the PR and marketing world in Western New York, working with some of the biggest names in the Buffalo area. Currently, Christy is the Chief Marketing and Experience Officer at Buffalo Medical Group and a professor at Medaille College. So without further ado, I give you our moderator for today's panel, Christy Witt-Berardi. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Matt. And that introduction was certainly not necessary, but helpful for everyone on. So thank you for joining. Great. Thank you for joining us today for Marketing Fundamentals and Best Practices. So we have a pretty robust panel here of experts to take us through some of the questions and share their insights and their expertise on certain topics that are of interest to the group. So let me introduce the panel. They're the really interesting subjects here, not me. First, we have Katie Krozik from 19 Ideas. I saw her dial in. I don't know if she just wants to say something quickly so that the camera takes over for her.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Looking forward to joining you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Katie. Next up, we have Neil Carroll, owner and creative director of VidWheel.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Followed by Mark Wise of Otherwise Creative Corp.
Hello, everybody.
And lastly, we have Rebecca Prez-Piora, senior graphic designer at Wendell.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
And I just learned my neighbor here on SJ.
Yes.
So I know that Matt talked a little bit at the beginning about housekeeping. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Send them to everyone so that we can see. And then at the end, we'll go back and address the questions in the chat. First question, and this one is for Katie. Marketing is wide and varied, as we know. How do you advise a company that comes to you to determine what type of marketing or strategies that they might need to solve their current challenge at hand? Is there a formula that they should use, or how do you give them that recommendation?
Yeah, this is something that we see a lot. So with 19 Ideas, we work with a lot of different companies and organizations from a variety of industries, a variety of sizes, and their audiences are different. Their goals are all different. So that means that their marketing strategies are going to be different. And I think that's really the bottom line that I would share with everyone is it's as much as we might want to be more efficient with our work to try to template things, it really, I think, is a disservice to anybody in marketing trying to kind of have a template of strategy things that would work for a particular industry or even clients in general. So I think what we do in number one is really understanding what are they trying to achieve? What are the business goals at hand? What's the takeaway for them? What's the ROI? For example, if we work with a higher ed client, it's typically getting students to sign up for that college and to retain students. So we have clear metrics that we establish at the beginning of our engagement before we then even take to really even developing a strategy. So I think first and foremost, what I would say is really understand the organization's business goals. And I think that we can all appreciate how marketing sometimes is misunderstood, or maybe the thing that does not get bought into at the highest levels of an organization. And what I have found is the more that you focus on those business goals that are directly in line with a company's strategic plan, the more you're going to be able to connect with the C-suite, with really getting the buy-in that you need in order to make that marketing strategy successful. So there is no formula. Unfortunately, I wish I could say, yes, if you do these things, but what I would say in a sort of consistent or formulaic way is you really need to listen. You really need to not only understand the business goals, but really make sure that you get the nuance of those goals if nuances exist within that organization or within the industry. And I think it's important to really define what success looks like, because there's a lot of different ways that you can build a marketing strategy and show success. But again, does it really hit the business goals? Does it hit the business goals within a particular quarter or even that year? Are you shooting long-term? Are you shooting short-term? And I think not just laying that out, but really level setting expectations so that you're consensus building all along the way. I think oftentimes the C-suite might think, or potentially whoever you might work with within an organization, they might want to see things quickly. And I think understanding, what it is that you're working towards can help also with those conversations around what's a quick short win versus what are the things that we're really just kind of plotting along the way, and that it's something that we need to evaluate at year's end or after 2 years, 3 years, and see how we've moved the needle. So I would really say that it's important to define what those goals are first before you get into the strategy. Many times I've had clients say, well, we need a PR strategy. We need to go out with the media. And then when we dig a little bit deeper, we realize that actually going out to the media isn't necessarily the thing to do first. It's actually a digital marketing strategy that's really going to get to their goals. So I think that that's really number one that you have to do, and to always reevaluate. I think it has to be any strategy that you put in place has to be iterative. Goals change, as we know, organizations change. Look at the last year, how we all had to adapt. So I think I've spoken up right there. I'll give someone else a shot.
That was excellent. Thanks, Katie. Very valid points. So you talked about needing to adapt and evolve, with given the circumstances. Marketing trends are also changing, even in a non-pandemic world. Us on this call, we know that that's true. How do you know which ones to try? Thinking TikTok, when is that appropriate to include in a business strategy? When is it just a fad that isn't worth investing resources? When do you embrace them and when do you abandon them? And that can be open to anyone that has an opinion on that.
I mean, I think it really depends on the client and their particular audience. Like a manufacturer of auto parts targeting retailers is probably not going to need a TikTok page. So for us, and I think everything Katie just said in the last thing was right on, and it's exactly our philosophy too. It's really about different things that are going to work for different clients. So I think for us, it's nice to have sort of a very young team of designers on board because they're sort of in tune with what's going on, and it helps us to kind of be introduced to some of the new media channels that are coming up. But again, it really depends on who the client's trying to reach, and then who that their audience, what tools their audience may be using to interact with them. So again, just like Katie said, it's gonna be different for everybody. And some of the newer things are going to work for some of the newer clients that are trying to hit that audience, and they're just not for some others.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. I was just going to say very quickly, I agree with Mark, and I would just boil it down to knowing your audience. Where does your audience live? If they're on TikTok, then be on TikTok. If they're not on TikTok, then don't worry about the trend. Sorry about that, Rebecca. Go ahead, please.
I was literally going to agree with you. The same thing. I think the trends are very easy to get wrapped into. Everybody sees somebody else doing it and they all jump on that bandwagon. And instead, you really need to just take a step back and see what your consumer values and what they want. What is the goal of the tool? Is it to gain more awareness in the market? Is it to recruit new employees, increase sales leads? TikTok might be it, but it also might be podcasts or blogs or vlogs or whatever. Snapchat is another new thing. So really in the end, you just got to figure out what your consumer wants and what you want your company to be perceived as.
Yeah.
The one thing of the many that this pandemic has taught us is that digital really is king, especially now. We were headed in that direction before, but it wasn't really fully embraced by all industries. But now we're seeing that digital is king. So that's everything from website to SEO, your Google traffic, your inbound leads. How do you dive into this for the first time? And if you're really doing it, how can you do it better? And let's punt this one to Mark.
Well, okay. So what you said is exactly true. We've seen a lot of our clients had to learn to adapt this year, right? So do things a little bit differently, not have that person-to-person contact. Even some places that we've worked with that have had physical retail stores, it's like that was the year to go online and sell online. And a lot of it really saved a lot of these companies because they had to change their business model. And the good thing about digital is it's easy to adapt quickly to changing trends in the industry, like the pandemic, which made us go a lot of different directions for a lot of clients. But there's a lot of different things. If you think about social media, website and SEO, landing pages, when you look at email marketing and all that stuff, it's all going to go back to what Katie was saying in the beginning. It's what the audience is looking for, how you're trying to reach them, and different things are going to work differently for different people. But digital has become key, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
So here's just a secondary question to that. So obviously perfection in a digital strategy is not attainable. You can always optimize a little bit more. You can always integrate something. You can continuously evolve that strategy to get an additional lead or get an additional impression. It's never, fully perfected, so to speak. What are some ways that you could do it better? If that is where you're really investing all of your time and resources, how can you continue to just make sure that you're seeing additional return on that?
Well, the beauty of digital, and let's look at websites, for instance, because you have, and I guess social media as well too, and email marketing, we're able to tap into such detailed analytics, stuff that we didn't have 10 years ago. Like I think about people used to send out direct mail postcards or catalogs, and the Uline sends out that giant catalog twice a year. You send stuff out, you don't really know what sort of reaction you're getting. You get customers and you sort of can see those trends, but with digital, you get immediate results. You can see who's going to the website, how long they're at the website, which pages they're going to, when they're coming in, when they're leaving. You can see what's driving them to the website. Same thing with emails and social media. You have such control of your analytics. It really enables you to sort of turn on a dime and change your strategy if you have to, because we just have so much information available to us that we didn't have, years ago. Does that answer the question, I think? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
That was good. There are so many marketing gurus, oftentimes self-imposed guru titles, or experts in my network, and I'm sure your networks as well. Your LinkedIn inbox is flooded with messages from salespeople that don't necessarily know your brand. There's sometimes cold calls, which is certainly a part of their business, and they're trying to make a living. But how do we separate, what is valuable to us, and how do we cut through the noise of what will be a valuable investment worth our time, when to take those meetings, when not to, and how do you find who you're inspired by?
Well, so I think that it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by your inbox. I know my inbox is flooded all the time, especially when you're LinkedIn Direct. But I think the best thing to do here is just take a step back, kind of go back to basics and start with the people that you trust. Maybe it's your neighbor, maybe it's a friend from high school or college. They don't necessarily have to be in the same realm as you or in the same, field that you're working in. But it's very easy to talk to them and maybe ask them for their advice. Perhaps they tried a product, perhaps they tried a service or a different company, and kind of get their opinion and their feedback as far as whether or not it's a good investment. I mean, I don't know about any of you guys, but I know if I'm on Amazon and I'm doing a purchase for myself, I'm looking at the reviews first. So it's a lot easier to make that jump or make that decision to go with a company or go with a certain product when somebody you trust has already gone through it or maybe has advice or somebody else that you can turn to. And I think as far as influences, I take my influences from my coworkers. I work at an architect and engineering firm, so I'm surrounded by phenomenal designers, interior designers, architects, a super talented marketing team. So I really take a lot of inspiration from them. And like I said, I also take a lot of inspiration from the people that I'm close to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of noise out there as the question stated up front. I think everything that Rebecca said is right on. I would add, for me, there's a lot of, I think everyone on this call probably does a lot of reading and consuming. So when you're reading, my thing is to try to get as broad of a view as possible. So, we've all heard about the vacuum recently, of course, and in the last handful of years that social media has either inadvertently or maybe purposely put us into. But it's important to read and consume different perspectives on marketing specifically. I think what's important is, and it kind of ties back to your earlier question, Christy, about trends. What's kind of real versus what's something to pay attention to versus not. Oftentimes, so when I'm looking at different things that are out there, I'm looking at the source. Is this somebody that I either know or I know know personally or know by reputation? Do I genuinely, for the most part, appreciate or find value out of the things that they're sharing? When I start to see people that I know and respect in the field talk about something, that's when I tend to pay attention. I'll say also, I often go by, I do a lot of observing, I'll say specifically on social media. Instagram in particular is an area that I have been doing a lot of watching recently, and TikTok as well, just to get a feel for how the platform is being used, how it's maybe being used that is like not so helpful. And you can see that in engagement numbers versus what those who consider to be influencers on Instagram are doing, and then how that might apply to our clients. It's not necessarily a one for one. If I'm watching a fashion influencer, well, that's not going to help a healthcare client. But what does is how they're communicating. Or for example, there's some major organizations that I follow, like the NAACP. A lot of what they're putting on a platform like Instagram, which is very visual heavy platform, they're putting consumable, readable information. Well, how are they doing that in an engaging and visual way that would engage an Instagram audience versus a Facebook audience or Twitter, for example? So I think there's a lot of learning that can be done just by observation. And then I think you have to kind of look at that objectively and start to understand like what feels right for you, for your organization, your industry. And again, it goes back to the audience and how's it really going to move the needle? Because even though you're maybe observing something or learning about something that would be either a trend or a tactic in the field, again, where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? Is it going to be in that social space where there's a lot happening right now versus something that's a little bit more tried and true, like email marketing, for example?
That's really helpful.
Yeah, so I guess just on top of that, I'd like to add, like I try to look at, age-old marketing magazines that became blogs online as opposed to reading. Kind of like I have young kids and I always say, well, you should try this. And I'm always like, well, where did you read this? Where did this come from? Being able to verify the source of information, I guess, as from an expert opinion, right? So, what are the design journals, what are the marketing blogs talking about as opposed to, I guess, what I'm seeing on some social media channels sometimes.
So talking about platforms and the content types that best perform there, we know that video marketing is a key tactic, particularly in B2B. But what about podcasting? When should we use that? When should we not? Seems like everyone is getting into this game. Is it strategic? Is it arbitrary? Is it contributing to their goals? Should we be doing it or not? Well, let's give that one to Neil.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I actually have in my notes here, everyone is getting into the game. Exactly verbatim what you just said. It's true. Like there's 1,000,001 podcasts out there now. And that's partly because it's such an effective and efficient medium, at least in my opinion, whether it's audio only or video podcast. But podcasts utilize a content creation tactic that I always recommend to clients of mine, which is talk to somebody smarter than you and then record that conversation, right? So it's a light lift in terms of creating content versus scripting everything. It's minimal, no scripting, minimal planning, and so it's kind of a good fit for a lot of busy professionals, especially if they're making their own content. And that all being said, the podcast audience, even through the pandemic here, has continued to grow. So it's kind of a famously affluent market as well. So I think if you've got a well kind of niche down and you have goals in mind of what you want to accomplish with a podcast, it can still be an effective medium.
Okay. And tell us a little bit more about video usage changes that we've seen in the pandemic.
Sure.
So in the last year, what have you seen with video consumption and creation?
Well, yeah, creation is way up, right? There's a lot more folks who are trying to do it either on their own or just trying to create video or utilize the medium to get their message out. I would say one of the biggest changes beyond kind of more players on the field is that there is a little more acceptance. Like you used to have to create video content that was super polished to project that professional kind of persona that you'd want to put out there. And there's a little more leeway in terms of, you know, shooting from a webcam in your home office, allowing for a little more authenticity to let people, I don't know, show off a little more about them personally versus trying to be so cut and dry from a corporate messaging standpoint.
And when does the homegrown content not work as well? And when is it worth investing in a professional to really make it polished and scripted and on the corporate mission and vision?
Yes. Yeah. When do you make that leap is the big question, right? I usually give people the advice that you try to, it's good practice to try it on your own, get an idea a little bit out of the gate. And then as you move forward and you start to find that you're looking at your content, know that you could take some steps forward to make it a little more polished or a little more on point from a messaging standpoint, that you can engage with professionals then. But it's like any other one of those questions. It kind of depends on situations, I guess. So
I do think poor quality though can really hurt a company, right? I mean, there's a lot to be said for shooting off the hip and kind of doing your own thing. But I mean, for a lot of professional organizations, if the video quality is poor, the sound, especially like bad microphones, could really do a disservice to your video quality. So I think there's a point where a professional quality video is going to really stand above some homegrown stuff. Not all the time, but I think you do see a point where if it's poor, I think it does do you a disservice.
I have maybe a thought here that I would love Neil to comment on, because this is part of the observation as I was sharing earlier, and some of the things that I've seen on Instagram. Now, I say this with a caveat because Instagram obviously has a certain type of audience that's on there. Is this, what I'm about to say, is it as appropriate for LinkedIn? Potentially not, but maybe it is for Facebook. But Neil, that question around, when is it appropriate to go more professional versus kind of a DIY, do it yourself? So our friend Mike Curtis is on this call and he's asking a lot of great questions. And I'm thinking about Mike in particular because Mike sells himself with professional services to companies. So he's not in and of himself a corporation. He's selling, as we like to say, the Mike-ness. So should Mike be getting on and doing sort of, these videos that are, and I get Mark's point completely. It's an important one, that quality, at least this, certainly from a sound perspective, you can't have the camera going all over the place, but could Mike do quick and dirty videos himself when he's thinking about, a quick 1-minute video that could actually be really helpful? How do you see that playing into it? Because I tend to think that there is some power in that. We'll continue using Mike as an example. Mike has he's got the Blue Yeti up there in frame, that we've had some of these conversations. He's a great example of, or a business like Mike's, where you have the smaller businesses and if you're able to create higher quality video content, not like studio quality, but high enough quality, to Mark's point, where you're not, doing a detriment to your own professional standing. Like there is some really there's some great potential in the ability to just be able to fire off 1-minute videos. I just recorded a video for LinkedIn right before we hopped on here, because it's like as simple as 1, 2, 3 when you're doing that kind of stuff. So
but you got the quality equipment though too.
Right. Yeah. Well, we sell this. So yeah, that's
right.
That's our space.
I agree with you guys. I mean, I do think there definitely is a spot for that quick, gonna shoot it out, as long as it, again, sounds well and is
right.
The camera's not, because that just gets distracting. But yeah, that little shot of video, search engines love content, search engines love video content, right? So that just adds to your website when you can do that kind of stuff too. So
I think that's it, and not just search engines, but I know that Instagram is really pushing Reels right now. So the more that you can do things on Reels, the higher Instagram is going to prioritize your content, and that's really kind of what I'm looking at. So, you know, Neil and Mark are really talking about it from a quality perspective and what works. I'm looking at it too from a, you know, there's a part of me that's wondering if, like, do you just get it out there? Do you just don't kind of be afraid with the analysis paralysis? Is this good enough? Or I don't have the funding. If you get the content out there, so long as the content is useful to your audience, that's really number one. And then they'll engage with it. I think people are a lot more forgiving, especially on a platform like social media. Maybe they're less forgiving on email because you're clogging up their inbox. This better be good. But on social, I think they're more inclined to give you a shot for a 30-second video.
Yeah.
Well, and ultimately, it's, you know, with all the platforms, it's coming down to dwell time, right? So when people see that video and they stop either on your website or on social media platforms, like the platforms want you to stay on longer. Google sees that as an indication that there's something worth looking at on your page. So that's one of the more powerful pieces of videos that can keep you there. And yeah, Katie, to that point, I always tell people ship it and then look at kind of incremental improvement after that first one, because your first video, if you're creating your own content, it's never going to be your best video. But yeah, you just got to kind of almost take your medicine a little there, right?
Just do it. As
Yeah.
Nike told us,
Right.
just do it.
So
Neil, one more question for you before we move off this topic.
Sure.
For the folks that are creating their own content or considering doing it, right? Just throwing back that medicine and getting it over with. What is the one piece of really digestible advice that you have for getting set up to do it yourself? If there's something that you say, never do this, always do this, what's the one piece of advice you could give folks to get started?
So at the beginning of the pandemic here, I started doing webcam coaching sessions to try and help folks feel like just that little bit more comfortable on camera, to, you know, try and help with everybody's transition there. And the one piece of advice I always gave, which speaks to Mark's point about audio and video quality, was fill the frame. So if you're way back from your web camera and you have, you know, just a webcam on your laptop or something, you're gonna sound pretty echoey, and the camera might not be able to get a real good shot of you. Just by getting close to the camera, by filling the frame, you can really help your audio and your video quality. So that's my go-to for that type of question when people ask.
Thank you. That is an easy one. And this one's for Rebecca or Katie, whoever wants to take it, maybe both, different areas of the industry. How do you suggest marketing managers stay aligned with their business goals? I know, Katie, you talked about this at the onset, especially if leadership won't share those goals with you.
Do you want to start,
ahead,
Katie?
Rebecca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, and I think in this situation, aside from I spoke earlier about trust, I think this situation, you're going to need communication here as a key. I think sitting down with that leadership team and asking the questions. They might not feel comfortable sharing business plans for proprietary reasons, and that's okay. But you need to be able to express your ideas and your goals with the leadership team, and express that you want to make sure that those goals are aligned with their sales strategies, and ensuring that you're directing that marketing campaign in the right direction. So I really think it's communication and trust. And again, you know, ask the questions. Don't be afraid. If you come to the table with open and honest communication, I think they'll see that and understand that and reciprocate in kind. I don't know, Katie, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, that's right on, Rebecca. I think if your leadership team, whether it's the leadership team within the company that you work for, or the leadership team of a client that has hired you, if they are not forthcoming with their goals for the company, that's a really big red flag, like huge. If that were my company, an agency working for a client, I probably wouldn't want to work with that client. And if that were me as an internal VP or director of marketing, I would have to honestly reevaluate if that's the right place for me. And I would say that to any CEO or person in leadership position who is not forthcoming. You are shooting yourself in the foot before you even get started if you are not being honest with the people who are supposed to be responsible for communicating to your audiences in a public way. If you are not honest and upfront and direct about what you're trying to achieve, that lack of transparency is going to seep throughout the organization and to your audience. And we live in an I think we live in a world where less and less you can get away with that kind of BS, maybe in the past. And my husband, Dan Gigante, who I think a lot of you know, he's my partner. His phrase is, it's getting harder and harder to be a fill in the blank, because of just the world that we live in. I don't want to go on, but it's one of those things, like if you're not starting from a point of trust and inclusion, how can you do your job as a marketing person to help communicate? So I think there would be a bigger problem there. Let's get off of that for a second and assume that they come around and they do share. I think the key is just making sure at every turn that you have consensus and that you're on the same page and you're aligned. So, and I think to get sometimes, maybe I'll reframe this, maybe they're not forthcoming with a budget. Maybe they're forthcoming with their goals, but not a budget that they have. I think the key there is really bringing it back to why is having that information necessary and critical to achieving those goals. For us as an agency that works with clients, it's not about so that we can bill you for every penny that you say you've got in your budget. It's so that we can maximize the budget to its fullest extent so that you're getting the most ROI, so that you can see we did a great job and you want to keep hiring us for more work. It's more about that. But I think that the key there is having that trust to begin with. And if the trust isn't there, then you kind of have to, you might be in a situation where you have to prove value and worth, with which I think, that's unfortunately a part of the marketing industry, is where you have to prove something's going to be of value. But the more that you can kind of, again, I go back to tying it to the bottom line, tying it to ROI, having measurable, tangible things that you can point to, that's all trust building. That'll be part of it. But I know that that's often a really difficult thing for a lot of us, especially when starting out trying to build a strategy.
Yeah, what she said.
It was really good. And Rebecca, you mentioned if they're not forthcoming or transparent, to sit them down and have communication and ask the right questions. What are some questions that you would recommend asking to engage in that with leadership? If they're not forthcoming and you're sitting down to do your strategic plan, what are some things that you need from them so you're not arbitrarily designing a plan that isn't custom to them?
Sure. I think really a lot of it comes down to maybe asking questions like, and I kind of took what Katie took it to for her perspective, that it was more the budgetary or maybe the dollars that they're not willing to share, or their revenue goals and that sort of thing. And maybe just opening up that communication and saying, it's not so much that we need to know what the revenue goals are for this coming year, but really, what are your goals? Is it to increase maybe employment and have more people coming into the department? Is it more to increase your outward facing clients, or to get more people in the K-12 market, et cetera? I guess just asking those specific details of where they see the company going, and hopefully they'll be able to be more open and communicative about it. I guess I took that question more like in the perception of that they don't want to share that plan because there could be, dollar values or something along those lines that they don't want to share. And maybe even it's bringing up something about a non-disclosure, where you're comfortable to say, I will sign a non-disclosure so that I can have access to that and be able to effectively do the job and create a marketing strategy that's going to align with their goals.
And in addition to the corporate goals, Jennifer had a good question that we should tackle right now. What are some other KPIs that you would recommend to measure success of a marketing campaign? And anyone can take this.
I can start off, and it's actually, I think it's going to lead into the next question, because when we start talking about that marketing, like proving our value, it is hard to put like a ROI on a specific marketing task, but it's not impossible. and you can see that there's definitely programs out there that will track different things, your website analytics, your Google Analytics, the traffic coming into your website. If you do an email campaign, I think somebody in the questions asked about like an A/B campaign. That's another great way to kind of track to see what is getting leverage and what's not. But there's definitely different ways to track those analytics and then report them back out.
So just expand upon a little bit of how does an internal marketing department or an external agency, an external partner, prove their worth with leadership?
Sure. So again, I think a lot of it, if you kind of go really high level with this, the marketing department and or a marketing company is going to kind of take on that pulse of your company. They're going to be, the writers are your voice, the designers are your visuals. That team is going to be creating, there's going to be developing of the tone and set the pace of your brand and really uphold your image, both to your internal clients and forward facing to your external clients. So a company investing into their marketing department or investing into a marketing firm is really going to be a direct reflection of who and what they want others to see them as. And like I said, it's hard to track specific marketing campaigns, but it's not impossible. There's definitely the services out there. If somebody's thinking about that, I would just encourage you researching it first, just to make sure that you're tracking the correct things you want to track. But there's CRM systems out there. Like I mentioned, there's website analytics. You can track your landing page activity. There's Google Analytics, which tracks everything under the sun that you do online. So there's definitely products out there that can help you get that proof, if you will.
I think that's great, because I think some of our best clients are relationship clients that we've spent a lot of time with, clients that we really understand their brand, so that what we say and do is the 100% reflection of what they want to say and do. So that takes time to do. Like sometimes we come in and just do a website or just do a brochure, and you have to gather so much information about a company just to do that one task. It's like, we should be doing everything for you, because we spent all this time understanding this about your brand and how you want to reach and who you want to reach, that it's a shame to throw it away on a simple project that it's hard to measure the success over one thing. Like people come to us all the time for websites. I need a new website. Well, why do you need a website? What are you trying to do with your website? We try and really get down to the basis of their goals, like you said, and trying to figure out what the answers are for them. But because we spend so much time trying to understand the client, it just behooves them to keep us on, to keep working with them. Some of our best clients we've worked with for 10, 12, 15 years. And that's because we understand them. As they change and grow, we change and grow along with them. We suggest new things to kind of keep them going as things change. And it's hard to be that one shot, come in and change. But if you don't spend time to really understand the company and who they are and their brand, it's hard to just do the one shot answer to all the problems.
Talking about getting smart on a brand, and doing all that brand discovery and really taking a look under the hood to get smart on how to best communicate on their behalf, how would you recommend linking the sales message for a given year with the marketing strategy? Anyone can.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to be the person talking all the time, so.
You started it, Mark.
Okay, so I've seen clients that have a sales department and they have a marketing department, and they're two separate things. And I could never understand that, because, you're marketing the business to get sales. Like, how could they not work together, right? So I always find that confusing. And it comes back to the entire company brand. Like, everybody needs to be on the same page. So I guess back to what I was saying, like really spending the time to understand everybody and making sure that all those departments are all kind of focusing on the same message.
Mark, I completely agree with you. That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't see how it makes sense to separate messages. I know I sound like a broken record talking about goals at every step, but it's really about aligning to what are you trying to do? And if there's that type of clarity internally, from the top down, then you should all be in line with what you're communicating both internally and externally. And really the internal and the external messages shouldn't be different either. It's just really different audiences. So I think maybe another way to kind of look at that question would be, are there different types of audiences within an organization, like people that get direct sales to versus a different type of audience member? Are you communicating one thing, or do you have to communicate one thing to an HR manager versus a CEO, or versus an end user? If there might be, we have a couple clients where they are a B2B provider, so we're communicating to the business, but then that business faces with the customer. So in that case, we have to develop materials that hit both the B2B and then ultimately B2C. So I would say it's less about the difference between sales and marketing and more about understanding the nuances between different audiences and what you might need to say, but ultimately it should still roll up to the same message.
I've seen plenty of companies where the owner's saying this, and the employers are saying this. And I'm like, when everybody's not on the same page, the brand is not united, and it just does the whole company a disservice.
Right.
And makes your job as a marketer, 10 times, 20 times as hard. I mean, everybody's got to be on the same page.
100%. And it's funny, Katie, because I also feel like a broken record, because I was just going to say for that, I feel like an open line of communication. Again, those two teams, especially if they are separated, have to be working hand in hand. They have to have that open line of communication, and they have to know it's too hard to market something if they're selling something else. So you really have to be working together just for the success of both the marketing strategy and the sales message.
I'm gonna say I agree. Yeah, everybody is on the same page on this one. The only thing I would add to the kind of everything should be pretty well integrated. But if you go through and do a customer journey type exercise as part of your marketing strategy, I feel like this kind of takes care of itself, because that customer journey should go through the sale and into kind of the retention of that client and continuing to service them. So yeah, that should be pretty comprehensive and include the sales messaging.
Actually, Neil, that was the perfect thing to add there, because you're right. Because in addition to like thinking about different audiences and where that message can be nuanced, the message gets nuanced the further along it goes down the sales funnel. So I think, you kind of have to look at it from the onset of who is the audience, develop the messaging appropriately, and then from there, who goes through the sales funnel and where are they in that process. So I think you're right. That's probably more it. So if the departments are separated, it's really making sure that the sales department is to Rebecca's point about keeping that clear and open line of communication to the marketing department, to make sure that marketing is supporting sales in a way to really get people moving along that funnel.
And that disconnect between sales and marketing can exist in small companies and large sophisticated practices.
Sure.
So what would you recommend, other than communication, but on the tool side, CRMs or other kind of software systems that can help for small to medium-sized businesses?
Well, I can start with that. I don't think it's a one size fits all solution, or one size fits the small, one size fits the large. There are tools upon tools that are out there that are going to be able to help you with anything from the CRM systems, any of your sales or marketing resources. I think really the key here would be those tools need to get matched with your employee skill set. So, I mean, just speaking from my line, you can have the entire Adobe suite at your fingertips, but if you don't have an employee that can utilize them, then maybe that's not the revenue or the money you want to spend there. And maybe it's something to switch to maybe a better, more user-friendly guided program that's still going to give you great design, but fits that employee and that employee's skill set better. You can use something like a Canva or something to that nature. But I really think that there's tons of tools out there, and really just researching what would be right for your company and for the employees that are going to utilize them is kind of key in that situation.
I agree. I think that the bottom line, there's so many tools, and everyone's going to have a different budget what, because there's a lot of expensive tools out there. And then there's also much less expensive ones. But I think the key there is consistency. It has to work. So it's not just the skill set for the employees, but is everyone going to buy into the system? Does everyone understand and have a clear view of what the system is for, and is it a wholly integrated part of your process? Because when it's introduced, but then only half the people use it, or they use it half the time, that's when it becomes less valuable to you. So I think as long as it's a tool that gets full buy-in from those that are expected to use it, and they use it consistently, the tool can be, can provide powerful data regardless of what it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Katie.
I mean, it all comes down to being able to share the important information with everybody, and everybody be able to put their 2 cents and weigh in on it. But like Katie said, if everybody's not going to use it, then only half the people in the organization are getting the information. I mean, everybody, again, I will also be the broken record, but everybody has to be involved, and everybody has to want to share the information and comment on it. And it doesn't do anybody any service if it's not being used by everybody.
I
Yeah,
want
and
to
I
make sure that, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Kate.
sorry, Chris. I was going to say, I think there was a question earlier about, are email lists still useful? This is a good example of if, yes, I feel they are. A CRM can really be a powerful tool to make sure that those lists are up to date and useful. And again, it goes back to what Neil was talking about with the sales funnel too. So I think it's how you use it, making sure that you're taking the time at the onset to segment your lists appropriately, to keep people updated, to make sure that you're logging into that database last interactions or conversations or what have you, in order to make sure that when you send an email, it's something that is going to be valuable to the person that you've created that list for. So I think that that's really something that's important to keep in mind, rather than kind of trying to do one giant dump. I mean, there might have to be that at the onset of onboarding a new platform, but keeping it updated is going to be so much more easier to keep that like an email marketing list that's really robust. It's going to not set you back. And be able to actually, as we were talking about earlier, getting people further down the sales funnel.
I want to make sure that we get an answer to Doug. So if there's anyone in the audience that has a CRM preference for a small size business and you're willing to share that as something that you value, put that in the chat to everyone so that we can see that too.
Can I just make a quick comment? I'm used to a multi-million-dollar Oracle system, and I know like Salesforce, there's just so many systems that you could spend a ton of time and they keep going down rabbit holes. But for a smaller company, that's all I was really looking for.
I use HubSpot for my small company, for whatever that's worth, Doug. But I will say it's I've used a lot of different CRMs, and you have to use them is my advice. You have to actually, put in the effort to use them, or else they're not as useful. But HubSpot's been great for us.
I was going to say 19 Ideas was a HubSpot partner, and we've since switched to SharpSpring. I just put it in the chat. SharpSpring has all of the same functionality as HubSpot, but it's much more cost effective, which we found as a small business ourselves. It was just a better savings, not just for us, but also for our clients.
It's great. Thank you, everyone. Keep them coming so that folks can leave here with names of some vendors that could be helpful to them. In addition to CRM specifically, or we talked about email campaigns, are there any other resources, tools, programs that small businesses could take advantage of? Or small Marcom departments, rather, if you're a team of 1 or 2?
I can plug one for video that I always plug for folks, which is for situations like this or creating your own videos easily. I'm a big fan of OBS, which is open broadcasting software, open source software that allows you to do graphic overlays and put in do screen captures, all kinds of live video production and streaming stuff that can be great for the one person or, few person department.
Few more questions, and then I do want to open it up to an open floor so that all the audience has an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you're working on a specific initiative, when does it make sense to go to the sales head, and when does it make sense to go to the department or the marketing head?
I think they should all be in on the same meeting.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I have a sales director and a marketing director here at Wendell. And I promise you, I won't say communication again. It could be, a game here for us, but it really is key for us. We have biweekly meetings with both teams. We get downloads from our sales director on where the sales teams are focusing and kind of what their objectives are and what proposals are coming into the queue, which then allows us on the marketing side to really focus on, our ads that week, our Google ads, our social media. We might geofence in a couple of different ads surrounding an area that I know that we're proposing on. But really for me, being in that meeting and being able to hear right from the beginning what's coming up and what's down the pipeline is really it's just key to making sure that, what we end up designing and developing is really hitting what the end user needs or what that initial objective was.
Anyone else? Or I'll move to the next one, which is a really good one.
Yeah, I was going to say there's really nothing to add to what Rebecca's just said. I think that's right on.
Yeah, bring them together.
Bring them together.
And this one, I've personally dealt with this. So in this scenario, your customer accepts and begins to implement your program or implement your agency for a new project, and it goes off track. So either your client starts ghosting you, or you're really deviating from the work back schedule that you had agreed on, and you're just really getting off track. How do you get that project or that client back on track so that you can hit your goals?
I love people who ghost. No, I think, well, again, hopefully you're not, ghosting is tough. I mean, if they've just gone radio silent, hopefully that's few and far between of what's happening to you, especially if in that case, I would imagine it would be an outside agency dealing with that type of situation. I think this kind of comes back to a lot of what we said and a lot of what I'll say communication this time, Rebecca. It comes down to having that really consistent dialogue and communication. There's usually some sort of warning signs or red flags along the way before you get to a point where somebody goes completely radio silent. That probably tells you it's maybe not going well, or perhaps it's not the right relationship or the right mix. But I think the more that you can really hone in on, and what we do at 19 Ideas at the onset of any relationship is we set a schedule of communication. So whatever that cadence may be, whether it's a phone call, a video call, fewer in-person meetings these days, but pre-pandemic in-person meetings, whatever the cadence is, so that we had a beat with our clients, and we make the process very iterative. So it's not like the client ever hears or doesn't hear from us for long stretches of time. I think having that consistent touch base, even just to say, this is what we've accomplished, this is where we are in process of the timeline that we set forward, and really, again, consensus building every step of the way. The last thing that we want to do is develop something that we've gone to work heads down for a month, let's say, and then we present it to the client and they hate it. So that's why we make sure that we're consistently showing progress along the way at different touch points. It's for a couple of reasons, to just really, again, make sure that we're building consensus along the way. There are no surprises. Everyone's expectations are set, not just in the beginning, but along the way. And so hopefully we're delivering on time and on budget and what our client is hoping for. I think that would be my best advice in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree. Keeping in touch along the way is key. And like Katie said, usually when that situation happens, hopefully you've seen it coming, because they usually don't just drop out of sight. First of all, it's very unprofessional, right? I mean, we're all professionals here, and if you got a problem, talk to me, tell me, let's work it out, let's come to a solution. But hiding, it's so easy to hide today, not only with digital technology, but with the pandemic. Like you can't just show up on somebody's front door and camp in front of their front door and say, I'm waiting for you to come out of your office. We need to talk about this. Communication along the way is the key to this whole thing, and pretty much everything we've talked about. So there you go. Communication, people.
Yeah, Ed in the chat actually asked me to answer. From my world, I'm in-house. So I do deal with sales vendors and I have a lot of great partners, Ed being one of them. And I don't want to use the word that we've been using, but it is communication. In my world, and my calendar is filled and it's hard to get on my calendar. So it's not meant to be a sign of disrespect or that I don't value your time. It's more of, it's difficult to get on my calendar. So more of it is be very transparent in the purpose. So always have an agenda, not just, meeting with X company. What is it that we're going to talk about? What is it that we're going to achieve? What are the next steps? And then be cognizant of the amount of time on a meeting. So are you doing 60 minutes out of habit when it could really be 30 or 15? I think sometimes short and sweet touch points more frequently are more productive than longer touch points or longer status meetings in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially now, since we're all used to meeting through Zoom, sometimes I'll spend 4 or 5 hours on Zoom meetings and it wears out after a while. So short, to the point. Listen, I'm a pretty friendly fella, but sometimes we don't need chit chat. Let's just get down to the point. What do we need to do here? And let's get to it. And then maybe we got time to chat after, but short and sweet.
Absolutely.
I want to piggyback that for a moment. I've learned to really appreciate that 15-minute meeting because, now we're still totally virtual for my business. And it used to be, I don't know, maybe you wanted to make it a little more worthwhile to do that commute. So you do an hour-long meeting, but the 15-minute meetings are a beautiful thing.
Can we cut that down to 10?
Yeah. I think they're one of the better things to come out of the pandemic for sure. The quick 15-minute touch points.
But I think you're having an agenda. What are we here to talk about? What are we trying to accomplish in this meeting? And just don't go into those meetings too open-ended. We really have a plan.
Absolutely. I want to pull some questions out of the chat. Matt had a question about, so obviously his position, he's in staffing over at Imagine. How involved are you not only in the marketing of a product or service, but also the company culture for attracting talent?
I can answer that, or I can at least start the answer. We do it. We are hand in hand with our HR department and our recruiting. So we are making, whether it's videos or welcome kits or something along those lines, we are right there with them. In a lot of times, some of the talent that we're looking for is very, very specific talent. So we really hone in. We use Google Ads and different LinkedIn strategies and stuff like that to really try to reach out and help our HR department fill those spots that they're looking for. So we're definitely involved in a marketing strategy for our recruiting, as well as, and your social media plays into that too. It really shows kind of that work-life balance or the work culture that you're trying to represent through your social media channels and also through your website. So a lot of that is through the marketing department or the marketing company.
I was going to joke and say it's like my full-time job now.
Yeah.
So really, I live by the Richard Branson philosophy of your employees take care of your clients and you take care of your employees. Our culture is my number one job right now, is making sure that we're in a client service, customer service based business. And how can I expect my team to give the 5-star treatment to our clients if they don't in turn receive the 5-star treatment from myself? So it is something that I think about constantly. And I do, just so that you guys know, I'm not totally out of the marketing game. I mean, I am involved in strategy, high level strategy with our clients, but honestly, mostly I am thinking about how to make sure that we have a culture that isn't just for our team, but a culture that our clients feel very much a part of, as they're an extended part of our team, and vice versa. We're an extended part of theirs. And that lineup of ethos and values is an actual, a really critical part of our business development process in making sure that we're the right fit for somebody and that they're the right fit for us, so that we can avoid having a ghosting opportunity.
Yeah, we've had clients recently come in and help, can you help us craft our hiring ads, do the copywriting. And for us, it's important to make sure, yeah, we can, as long as we, again, understand your brand. We're making sure that your brand is coming through as this is a great place to work. And so it's been kind of a new thing for us to help people on the HR end of things. But again, if we really understand the company, I think we're right there to be able to help them track the right people to fit in there.
I think a key point too to keep in mind is that your HR, your culture is every bit, it's internal communication. It's a different name, but it's the same coin, So I think if there's a disconnect between the two, that's maybe something to look at, is why aren't they jiving? Because I do think it's very much, it's how you would communicate externally. It should be how you communicate internally, and what you've got going on the inside is probably reflected on the outside too.
Yeah, it was a client last year asked us about, helping them craft their Indeed, I guess, post. And then when I looked, all these reviews on the Indeed page were just horrible. And I was like, it's hard to, you're telling me all this great stuff about your company, but obviously the people who work there, some of it is obviously disgruntled employees are going to use that as their place to put comments on. But if your outside company's not matching your inside brand, it's hard to really come in and say we can help you bring people in if they're going to come in and have a bad experience.
I totally agree with that, Mark. And I think that goes back to earlier conversation around building trust and having that transparency. And I think as a marketing partner, whether it's an internal one or an external agency, there has to be some sort of trust there to be able to say, hey, look, we call that social listening, or if it's brand listening, you do that. You have to be able to say straight up, this is not good, and there's something that's not jiving here. And we say all the time too, that your internal audience is always one of the audiences that you communicate to, whether or not you have a formal internal communication plan around it. So it's something I think that a lot of people don't necessarily think of, but maybe they should more regularly or more readily.
And I don't know if you found this to be true, Katie, but especially with a small startup or a company just beginning, that not only you're helping them with the marketing, but sometimes you're helping them with their business development, and they're asking you HR questions, and they're asking you all these questions, and you end up like, well, I know a lawyer, here's a lawyer you can talk to, here's an accountant. You end up sort of helping them with their business, and that's, I guess, just part of the whole thing sometimes.
Absolutely. I would take that a step further and say not even just with, certainly with startups or with companies just starting out, Mark, but I'd say oftentimes, even though marketing is our main point of focus, we run our own business, or my husband and I run our own business. So we're often asked more broader, and even with more established clients, just in terms of how businesses can better function. Clients might look at some operational things that we're doing, including our culture, to ask how they can implement some of those things for themselves. And it's more from an advice perspective, but I think, again, that goes back to the trust building. And if the organization does not have a chief marketing officer, I have found that there's been an appetite as an outside agency partner for that client to bring us more into the fold for some of those bigger picture business questions that they're asking themselves. So it's an interesting point you raised, Mark, because I have found that to be true, which just goes to show you that marketing is a much more valuable perspective than just, sales or getting people to to buy your service or product.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also a husband and wife business like Jill and I, aren't you?
Yes.
So I always get those family business questions all the time.
Yes.
Like, just keep
God,
doing it. They always say how, and I
Godspeed.
say you keep doing it.
Right.
Thank you, guys. I want to make sure that we're able to get to the questions from the audience too. Is there anything that you've been sitting here wondering for the last hour that we can answer for you? Either unmute your mic or put it in the chat if you're more comfortable with that, but we would love to address some of those too.
I know Mike Cardis earlier had a question about A/B testing. I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and trying to find it. I've been filling up the chat with all my rhetoric, and I can't find it. But
Oh, right here. Can they talk a little bit about A/B testing or multiple differentiated experiences to make marketing efforts coherent?
Yeah, so I guess we find it really important in website development projects, as well as everything. But I've seen a lot of people have been, and that's funny that you asked that question because it seemed to be like the buzz all of a sudden. A lot of people keep asking me about that specific way to review things and test things, and with like a website development project, we can actually have the website built and have it hidden, and it can be used by people and really kind of compared to other companies and compared and watch people's tracking and uses of a website, filling out a form, making sure they're doing what we want them to do. So it's become important, and a lot of people seem to be asking about it lately.
Yeah, and I think I would just add too, I mean, that yes, definitely on the website. I think one of the areas that I have found to be, and Mike, it's funny that you mentioned you asked the question around email marketing, because I was going to say, I think A/B testing with email is probably the most, not crucial, but if you're going to do a tactic, email is one that you should be testing multiple templates for. For example, something that might just be that like features some sort of image or video that is right there. They get the information, boom, they don't have to click anything, versus something that's maybe a snippet of information, maybe it's a paragraph or a headline, byline copy, and then you want them to click to go to your website to fill out some form or whatever the call to action might be. But I think testing short form versus long form, a lot of imagery or emphasis on, say, video versus more text treatments and static images. I think that that's definitely something that is worth exploring. You can probably also take that to social media as well. And Mike and I actually had a separate conversation around this. I had mentioned the NAACP earlier because I think that a lot of brands that have heavy written content can still do some really cool graphic design treatments on, again, a heavily visual platform like Instagram. So I think testing out what sort of engagement you're getting on certain posts, like, is it worth using Mike as the example to do a 30 to 60-second video, or is he getting better engagement using a sound bite that is graphically treated, and maybe it's a 3 to 5 carousel post that he also then shares to stories versus reels. But we also know that Instagram is prioritizing reels, so maybe there's the answer, but it's still worth maybe knowing like how much more engagement are you getting on something like reels that is going to be prioritized versus having a graphic treatment to written content.
And that data is available immediately in the digital realm, which is the beautiful thing about it. Like, as soon as you send out an email, you're tracking engagement immediately. So that testing is so easy to do in the digital world. And again, sending out I always talk about Uline. I use them as an example. They send out that giant catalog a couple times a year of all their products, and they keep doing it. And I'm like, they have such a robust website. Why do they keep sending out that catalog like that? How do they know if that catalog is working? Have they just been doing it forever? That's what they do? Or are they getting real data that the catalog's working when they could easily be tracking users to the website and email marketing and social so much quicker? So I just put it in the recycling bin when I get it.
That's all helpful.
I got a phone book. It went right in the bin.
Another question from the chat. This is from Tom. Given the trend towards personal branding on social media, should companies be training their employees on marketing or branding best practices as an individual?
I think anyone who's potentially public facing should at least get the basics of, depending on the medium they're going to use, the basics of best practices around it. And then I know other companies that we've worked with who have been very successful, just kind of letting their employees go, right? Do their own thing. They're able to create their own content. And as long as they stay within the messaging, the overall messaging of the corporate guidelines, it worked well for them.
Yeah, we here at Wendell, we actually use a product that actually helps and encourages our employees to share Wendell's news via social media. So as we put out the piece, then it gets sent to all of our employees here, and then they have that choice whether or not they want to share the story or not. So it kind of just helps them guide as to what they're sharing for Wendell and how they share it.
I just think
Yeah.
any company's brand guide should have at least some basic guidelines if they're going to let their company post about what they got going. Just some basic rules to follow. I think it's just helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And the PR person in me also wants to say that as a reminder, anyone who posts on behalf of the company, even if it's not as the company, but they share something, or even if it's not related to the company you work for, but if as yourself are commenting on client pages or something that's even not related at all, you're still a representative of the company that you work for. And if you are in say an agency role that works on behalf of clients, depending on how much that client sees you as an extension of their team, you're representing not only your employer, but your client as well when you're commenting as yourself. So I think you have to keep that in mind. And yes, having that kind of understanding and training is crucial. I think we saw in this last year, there were some folks that got into some major trouble with their employers for some comments that they posted as themselves privately. I think, again, we live in a world where everything, you have to think of everything is, what is it? Write an email like it's going to be read out loud in a deposition one day. I think you have to think about that at every turn.
It's like what you tell your kids when they're on social media. Nothing is everything is permanent.
Right.
It will stay forever once it's
Right.
out.
God help us all.
Right.
I
Another
believe
question.
they fired me. I stormed the Capitol on my own time. That was my vacation day.
Another question from the chat. With the majority of high-end B2B still being word of mouth from trusted friends or peers in an industry, what marketing processes can we use to increase or nurture that referral network? Rebecca, you talked about your neighbor or a friend. It's more trusted when it comes from someone you know. It's more authentic. How would you recommend kind of asking for that referral without asking for it?
Well, I mean, I guess it's really going back to like talking to the people that you know, the people that you trust. It's kind of hard with the fact that, like, I know in the past we would have conferences and actually meet face to face and have some conversations and instill and enable some more networking and trusting ability. But yeah, I guess it would just be, coming to events like this and talking to people, and really getting their perspective and learning, that they know kind of what they're talking about, and you trust the fact that they were successful in the things that they were going after, and that that that's somebody that you could reach out to for, professional help or, advice on where they should take their product or their direction.
I agree with that take. It's all about building expert status at this point. If you want to expand that like sphere of folks that are trusted enough to or that trust you enough to refer to you, you need to get more people to believe that you know exactly what you're talking about and that you can help them and that you're the answer they're looking for.
And then when whatever they're working for is a success, that only just further credits you and gives you that credential behind you that, what you were saying was accurate or helpful, and, that just gets spread further.
Right. Social proof.
for sure.
Testimonial marketing is still such a powerful form of marketing that it doesn't have to be in the form of a commercial or getting someone on film to say that they refer you. It could even be that in the part of your process that you develop is that when you finish a project, and I know Mike asked that question, he's in the professional services industry, when you are either, if it's a long-term engagement, maybe at a certain time of the year, that's the best time to approach your client, or at the end of a project, make sure you ask for either a really good Google rating or a quote that you can include in marketing materials, that you can include in proposals or your website, or if they are willing to go on camera, if that's part of a marketing strategy. You know, I know that it can be something that you can share those 30-second videos, not just on social, but also on your website as well. But I think making sure that you include referrals as part of your SOPs, I think is important for, especially when you're engaging with clients. And I'm also reminded of, you know, the advice, the age-old advice of, you know, make sure that you tell the client that you want the business. So if you're in a situation where you're looking for referrals, make sure you tell those who you're working with and you have a good relationship with, you know, if you feel I've helped you, you know, if you know of anyone else that could use my services, please make sure you put me in touch with them. Or I would love it if you, you know, gave me a recommendation to friends and colleagues. I think making sure that you say that is an important part of it as well. Something that I think people don't necessarily think about, but maybe it's part of that earlier question around building a personal brand, is making sure that you aren't shy about, you know, asking for a referral or an introduction and promoting yourself. I know it can feel awkward, but for those that you build a really solid foundational relationship with, it should be easier than a cold ask.
Absolutely. And even to build on that a little bit, you know, with here at Wendell, we do the same thing. So after a project's done, and sometimes a project is 2, 3, 4 years long in the making, when a project's done, we send out a survey right away, kind of how did we do? Where can we improve? What did you like? What did you not like? And then we use those after action items as just guidance towards the next project. And we immediately ask, can we have a referral letter? Is there something that we can put in writing? You know, and get their approval that we can use that testimonial just as kind of, you know, what you're saying, almost like credentials to how successful we were in past jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of our best clients have been referrals from some of our best clients.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Yep.
And Tony said, and thanking them when it works out. And I wholeheartedly agree. Thanking them and not just maybe in a one-time thing, but that kind of goes back to making your clients be part of your culture, and always kind of remembering even what Mark's saying about, you know, some of the long-term clients being referrals, always remembering how those connections were made in the first place.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience, or do you want 30 minutes back from your afternoon?
I have it's a question or a thought or just something to scare people with, but all the things that you're talking about, the Instagram and TikTok, and the fact that when I walk by Starbucks, my cell phone knows that I'm going by and says, "You want coffee, don't you?" If you go back 5 years, how much of that stuff wasn't even in existence? And in the next 5 years, it's probably going to have the same amount of brand new things that we didn't even know about.
It can be scary. PBS just did a thing I watched last night about facial recognition in China. Like, you can't apply for a credit card without putting your face into the system so that they can recognize who you are as you walk down the street. And that's pretty scary. You know, you talk about something and next thing you know, it's popping up in ads in your Facebook feed. And you realize that they're listening to things you're doing all the time. My phone is sitting right here, and who knows what my phone is doing when I'm not activating it. So I guess there's power in information, but it is scary to a lot of people that so much is being known, I think, especially in social media. So hopefully we're going to get to a point. What the thing I saw on PBS last night said, well, other countries are sort of using this information to sort of control and track. It just seems like the United States is just using this information to market more. So take it for what it's worth there, I guess.
And it definitely can be a little overwhelming because of the fact that now we have access to so much data and so much information that it can get overwhelming trying to track it all and keep track of who was on what landing page and for how many seconds and what did they click on and stuff. So you almost have to take it off in little bite-sized chunks and really digest it a little bit at a time. It's exciting, I think, the technology and the different platforms and stuff, but I do have to laugh because I felt like 10 years ago, it was the list, the list, the list. It was, you got to have your list. Your list has got to be accurate. And we kind of came full circle here and talked about the list when we were talking about some CRM systems. So it's funny, even though there's new technology and new data and new things happening, make sure your list is good. The list is everything here.
I would even take it a step further on bringing it back to basics. Like, again, this is the PR person in me. Human interaction, hopefully, at least not in our lifetimes, will ever go away. And I think that the pandemic has shown that when we were, taken apart, if you will, or we're not allowed to see each other in person, where people really felt the need for that connection. They felt the void of that. I think that there is nothing, and something that I always learned in my, when I was coming up in my career, is it has to be both. It's a mix of both, using digital and traditional mechanisms. So I think as much as the technology is going to advance, it's going to, and it's advancing in some scary ways, as Mark was just saying, with some countries overseas. It is scary, and hopefully we're never using that in an abusive way where, but as we all know, we've seen the congressional hearings that Zuckerberg has testified on, and we know what there's a lot that we probably don't know is going behind the scenes. So I think that an important part of any marketing and communications strategy has got to be the personal connection with people. And I don't just say that from if you're working with a client, or we've talked about the internal connections and through culture, but I think it's really about the authenticity and building that authenticity with your audiences as best as you can. I think that I think I mentioned it earlier, people's BS meters are sort of on high these days anyway. So to not be transparent, to not be authentic with your communication is just only going to set you back. I think that too, when the world is able to safely gather in larger groups than 50 people, I think we're going to probably see a new wave of coming together in a way that we haven't in a while, because we'll appreciate it more. So what sort of in-person tactics should we be thinking about, harnessing that's going to gather more of that authentic connection?
Hear, hear. I'm always happy when my kids turn their phones off.
Yeah. Yep.
Matt, you want to plug some future events?
That is a fantastic segue, Katie. Thank you very much. Before I say anything else, I want to thank Katie, Rebecca, Neil, Mark, and of course Christy as well for an awesome afternoon. This was very cool. This was also simulcast. I think simulcast would be the word, on Facebook as well. So you can find that at our Facebook page. Anybody who is a member also has the access to watching this back in the format in which Zoom allows you to watch back Zoom things. How cool is it, by the way, that Zoom is now like Kleenex, right? It's like, every video platform is just Zooming. But anyway, so as I was mentioning, there's a great segue from Katie, because for the first time since this time last year, BNSME is having an in-person event. April the 16th, we are having a breakfast, a members only breakfast networking event, all social distancing and masks and individual wrapped whatever breakfast things. But it is an in-person event at the Hampton Inn on April 16th. You can find that on our website, bnsme.org. It is a members only event, and Tony Blasting, our illustrious president anyway, is actually sponsoring anybody who's joined as a new member since the beginning of last year, as he is going to sponsor your attendance there. So he'll pay for your breakfast thing, sandwich or juice or whatever. So that's coming up on April the 16th. April the 26th, we're having a awesome trivia event trivia night, also in person, but hybrid, so in person and also available online. And it's a cocktail networking event as well as a fundraiser for Junior Achievement of Western New York. That's going to be a really cool trivia live in person and also virtual trivia event to benefit JA, which is our sort of partner charity organization. Also, don't forget our golf tournament coming up on June 21st. You can golf obviously it's in person because it's golf. And you can find that also on the BNSME website. If you are interested in joining BNSME, I have a slide deck thing, but I'll just share like 2 bits. Actually, I don't even know how to advance a slide in PowerPoint anymore. There we go. Wow, this is way too much transitions. I didn't make this. I need somebody. Anybody know anything about marketing? So if you're interested in membership, joining BNSME to get access to all this really cool stuff that we do. And now the slideshow is going by itself. Just send an email to BNSME at bnsme.org. And we can help you become a member of BNSME and have access to all this really cool stuff that we're doing. And if anybody has anything else they want to add at the end, Katie, Neil, Mark, Rebecca, and anybody, somebody's missing. Who disappeared?
Christy
Oh,
does.
Christy left. Okay. Thanks, Christy. If anybody has anything else they want to add, feel free to do so now. We have a few minutes. I can break people out into breakout rooms if they want to chat as well.
I just want to say thanks for having me. I mean, I could talk marketing and branding all day, so try me.
Awesome.
Great event, guys. Thank you for everybody who participated. It was very engaging and time well spent. So thank you for all the information you shared.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
If anybody wants to stick around for the next, let's say 15 minutes, I'll just pop a couple of breakout rooms together if anybody wants to chat with anybody else. If you're leaving us, thank you very much for being here and spending 90 minutes of your Monday afternoon with us. We really appreciate it. Once again, our panelists, thank you so much. You guys are fantastic. There's a reason that we had you come here because you know what you're talking about, and you're also very good at what you do. So thank you again, and we'll see everybody again very soon.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.